Hello YouTube, this is Vidhead85. I'm coming to you today with an interesting topic. We don't hear about this a lot, especially we hear a little bit about the flip side, VAWA, with what was happening with the reauthorization of it, and it's been reauthorized every 2 years by the next Congress. Every time it came up, which is apparently every 2 years. But I want to talk about men as victims of domestic violence. Too often we see men as simply the perpetrators, and hence we don't see men as the victims of domestic violence. We don't see them as victims of psychological domestic violence either. It could easily happen to anyone. It could happen to a straight guy. It could happen to a gay guy too. Men are victims of domestic violence, and we don't like to think about that because men are supposed to be strong, and even though men are strong, there's always someone stronger. And some men may be reluctant to hit a woman. And if they call the police, they won't be taken seriously because they're a man. They can hold themselves. They can defend themselves. And I suggest in an event of domestic violence, you arrest both of them, to be honest with you. Because that way, I think that will help detract women who want to use it as a weapon against their boyfriends. Because oftentimes, there are women who will do that just to be real nasty to their men. So I remember hearing a story of a person that I really admire. I will leave them unnamed, but they dealt with a really bad situation where, according to the story I heard, it sounds like physical abuse may have been involved. I'm not sure. But for the sake of argument, say it was. And this was a gay man. And some people may not look at it as domestic violence because it's two men. I don't care if it happens in the home. If it's a significant other, a partner, then it is domestic violence because that person resides with you. That person is connected with you. But there are also straight men, and there is a facility somewhere, I don't know what state it's in. I think it's probably in California, but it's off of a desert-like road because they house battered men. And often, whenever we see any depiction of a battered person, it's usually female. We see those movies on Lifetime. We see it everywhere, but what we don't see is a man who has been through a similar situation. According to his story, Kelsey Grammer has been a battered spouse. So I think that VAWA shouldn't only be Violence Against Women Act, but it should be Violence Against Spouses Act, because no matter whether you're a cisgender person whose gender and sex match, or a transgender person, and after let's say you're a transgender woman who likes women, and they're beating you, that's domestic violence. I don't care what gender the participant is. And some women who are perpetrators of domestic violence, sometimes with straight women, it could be that her father rejected her. So she became really successful, and because she didn't want that to happen again after her father left because he wanted a boy, she became really successful, and she would beat her husband anytime the mood hit her because she felt that was the only thing that she could control him, is by beating him. And a fly, just annoying. I think I killed it. I don't know. I don't see it. But that was random, wasn't it? But we see that actually, from what I've been told, that actually happened in Arizona. She hit him with a tire iron when their car broke down and killed him. Why don't we hear more about this? Because oftentimes they're ashamed. They're ashamed to admit that their wife, their girlfriend, is beating them. I think maybe with gay men it may be different. I don't know. But all gay men are not created equal as far as how they are, and we're not all equal as far as carbon copy of each other. Also, we all don't know each other, contrary to popular belief. But I don't know if it's any different with gay men. I have never dealt with abuse. I don't anticipate it. Oftentimes, the first hit is shock when they first haul off and hit you, because you can't believe it. I also have heard out of my boyfriend, actually, he dealt with an abusive spouse, and my boyfriend he's not weak at all. He's very strong. He's compact and everything. And the man that he was dealing with was pretty strong too, and usually Daryl would be the one on the floor. And I remember also in one of the videos, so I believe since it's featured in a video, that he doesn't mind me talking about this. Paul the Gay Comic Geek, he said that he was in an abusive relationship where the guy, he doesn't look like Paul looks like he can throw down too, but he knew when he was outmatched, and a lot of times that's what they count on. And it was a pretty rough time for him too. So domestic violence can happen to anyone. Domestic violence happens to straight men too. And if anything, we gotta have resources. We have to get the word out. And the first thing that you need to do with a domestic violence victim is believe that. A lot of times when we look at who the victim is and then who the perpetrator is, we start to rationalize. We start to think that that could not be them. Oh, Clayton beat up Ronnie? Well, maybe he asked for it. That's what the perpetrator wants you to believe. Maybe he was cheating or something. Maybe this was happening. I don't condone spousal abuse whatsoever. That's one thing that I will draw the line at. If a man thinks that he can hit me and everything will be okay, it's not okay. If he is stronger than me and I can't overcome him, I got pots and pans and knives, hell. But the whole thing for me is I won't deal with that. I've dealt with some things, but I won't deal with an abusive spouse, because you can kind of tell. It starts out as verbal abuse, and then it starts out as hitting, and then it gradually gets worse. So by the time the first slap is issued, for lack of a better term, the groundwork's already there. It's already there because they've already abused you in public verbally and then pushed you down or whatever, and you're sitting there laughing about it. And there's a difference between playful stuff, of course. But by the time that first slap is heard, the groundwork's already set. And then there's the whole isolation thing. And this can happen with men, and it can happen with women too. They isolate you, and then they say that you can't talk to they start gradually eliminating friends, and gradually start eliminating family. Take your phone away. They put themselves in a place of power in your life. And then after they abuse you, they say, I'm sorry, I'll never do it again, this and that. So it's that bow and then the embrace, which gives you false hope that they can change. And I'm not going to say that they can't, but it's unlikely. But it also depends on the growth of the individual. But someone can love you to death. That can very well happen easily, because you feel as if you can't turn to anyone, as if people will take the perpetrators' side, which many can and many do. But I'm speaking in generalizations here, because no matter what gender the victim, the calling card is always the same. And they get off on knowing that you feel powerless, and they get off on exploiting that feeling of powerlessness. But we have to groom a more understanding law enforcement agencies. We need to groom more. We need to educate legislators about that, so they can set aside monies for men's shelters when men are abused. And you should know whether or not the perpetrator is also male or female, because if it's one set up for gay men, gay victims of domestic violence, or just period, I'm just saying, let's say there was one for gay victims, because sometimes you just can't. Gay men may understand something that straight guys just don't, and that's just a reality of the whole thing. But we have to really start to get this word out there, and we have to understand that those men aren't weak. They just need help, but they have to be willing to help themselves first. A victim of domestic violence will not. The only way they'll get out of that situation is if they help themselves, and they got to take that first step. So, like I said, we're often used to seeing women as victims, but we're not used to seeing them as perpetrators, and we're not used to seeing men as the victims. But we need to address that, and we need to make sure that people know that this can happen to a man. And when it does, what resources can we give to them so that we can empower and equip them? Honestly, I think martial arts lessons are a good start. Or if you don't have the confidence that you can fight, you can if you're backed against a wall. Trust me. Hot grits and a frying pan can do the trick. And oftentimes, like a bully, all they need to have is someone to stand up to them and beat them, like they've been beating you for the last how many ever long years. So those are my thoughts, some opinions I have. Rate, comment, subscribe. Have you been a battered husband or a battered spouse? Have you been someone who tried to get away from your wife or your partner, and people laughed at you because you're a man? Men out there, what was it like? What is it like if you're still in that situation? And I encourage you to get someone that you can trust. Get someone who you know will not buckle under the persuasion of your perpetrator, because perpetrators of domestic violence, they're very cunning. They know how to manipulate people. So rate, comment, subscribe. I want to hear from the men, because we often hear too much from the women, which is not what, and they have resources to help them too. That doesn't make it any less dangerous, though. Their situation isn't any less dangerous either. But this is a side that we've neglected to see because we don't want to see it as Americans. So that is all for now. Have a great day.